Hi, everyone. This is Evie Wenting, founder of Ethical Edge Experts and your host of Let's Talk About Ethics, the podcast where we explore how integrity shows up in real life, real leadership, and real business decisions. On this show, we move beyond policies and headlines to talk about culture, courage, and the everyday moments that shape our organizations. Today, I'm excited to welcome back Rad Samra, a respected compliance and ethics leader with deep expertise of helping organizations navigate complex risk environments. Rad brings practical, business grounded perspective to compliance, focusing not just on rules, but on leadership, accountability, and building programs that actually work in the real world. Rad, welcome back to Let's Talk About Ethics, and I'm super glad you are here.
Thank you for having me, Evie. I'm excited as well, and excited about the topic that we want to talk about today because it's near and dear to my heart. And I do a lot of research and delve deep in it, and always happy to talk about what we were going to talk about today. So I'll let you introduce the topic and we'll go from there.
But before we get to the main topic, which is on everybody's mind, and it's AI, we're going to start with the quick and easy question. In your experience, where do organizations most often confuse legal compliance with ethical leadership?
Legal compliance and ethical leadership, they get confused when the leadership of the organization is really focused on profitability and what's good for the company. And not to say that profitability shouldn't be their main concern, but it shouldn't be their only concern. And that's the difference between somebody who's just thinking from a business standpoint versus someone who has ethical and compliance frame mind and looking at it that way. Profitability is very important. It's what keeps the company going, it's what keeps people employed, and it should be the main focus. But profitability without ethics, without compliance, is not a profitability, it's a legal risk waiting to happen. So it starts with the leadership, it starts what they emphasize on, and it starts with what they fund. Really, that's how I see it.
Yeah, and I know we talked about it in one of our previous podcasts where we were saying be careful which behaviors you are rewarding, right? So there is a
Absolutely.
profitability, but if you are rewarding someone who is getting great outcomes but cutting corners and maybe breaking the law, those are the kind of things that we warn against, and where managers or leaders really need to take a look and making sure that they're rewarding not the end result but actual behavior that leads to good result.
That's actually a great point and a great bridge connection between what we're talking about today versus what we talked about previously when we looked at the influence of leadership and how they influence the organization and its behavior. When you are the metrics that leadership use has a great impact on the behavior of people. If you're going to hire rainmakers and you gonna hire people when at all cost and they meet the numbers that you are interested in, that makes you bonus and that makes you profitable versus someone who is a team player who cares about ethics and compliance. So if you look at the entire process from how profitability occurs versus just looking at the end result from a leadership perspective, you will get totally different view. So the metrics they measure, what they emphasize on, has an immense effect on the behavior of the organization as a whole and individuals in particular.
Yeah, and before we start really talking about the main comment, one thing that I was just thinking about, in many cases, you have some brilliant and super smart people who are terrible test takers. So if you
Absolutely.
only concentrate on the data pool that's given, my feeling is, and I think that's leading to our conversation, that a lot of good candidates or a lot of good potential employees may be missed just because if you only go through finding the round hole for a round peg kind of a scenario, you're missing a lot of
Absolutely.
people because it's not always black and white. And as we know in compliance, it's a lot of gray. All right.
It's absolutely outcomes can be different. I mean, the test taker example you use is very good example because if you're just looking at ultimate grade A, B, or C. If someone gets an A, then they fulfill their mission accomplished, right? But how they get an A? Did they cheat? Did they? What did they do to get this A? Did they? Where they had the discipline? Did they step on people before they got the A? This is what matters. It's like taking. I think I use this example. You look at someone ran a 5K and they ended up finishing the race below 18 minutes, which is great time. But at the same time, if you don't care whether they ran the track with the guardrails
Mhm.
and ran the track the right way, then they might have taken a shortcut through the woods and they got there. And if you're going to ultimately give them the trophy, so to speak, then you didn't care about the process of how they got to the finish line. So it's not only the finish line, it's not the ultimate result, it's also the way they got there, the process which took them from point A to point B is what matters.
Yeah,
Not
I
only that.
agree. I think we need to shift our focus from results only oriented to how did we get here, right?
Absolutely. Exactly.
So let's flip a page and we talk about our main topic, which is AI, right? So AI is increasingly used in hiring and performance decisions. What ethical risk do you worry the most right now?
The ethical risk I worry most with applicant tracking system is how much there are lack of standardization when it comes to using those tools, and how much murky water exists when it comes to assessing the fairness, the ethical standards, and the liabilities that comes with using those tools. Really, it depends on who you ask and who you talk to and how you interpret things. So what concerns me the most is how slippery of a fish the tool is, and how could it be so dangerous, yet we could be so oblivious about the risk and the danger that this tool can create without governance, without guardrails, without ethical standards.
Right.
Until that happens, I'm always going to be concerned from a compliance standpoint.
Yeah, and you recently gave a presentation to HR leaders. How did that go?
It really went well. The thing about it is it was a lot of it was an eye opener for them because I think I accomplished my purpose, my goal in showing them, if you really do not measure what you're supposed to measure, if there is no human in the loop in measuring the outcomes and what AI is giving you, how much of a risk you are taking. And that was an eye opener for a lot of them. And they saw clearly the importance of assessing the tool, assessing the fairness, assessing the compliance, and at the same time, knowing having a human in the loop and how important that is. And I got a lot of positive feedback about the presentation itself. A lot of people were like, that's scary what you talked about. So it was mixed messages. My goal was fulfilled and it was very effective, but I'm happy to see that some people got little concerned about their use of ATS, not knowing what it's doing and all of that.
And I shared with you just before we got on the call something that I experienced recently, actually, this week. I was part of a conference where AI also was a topic. I
Hmm.
spoke with a person who was on the investor in AI kind of side of things. And I
Right.
asked about, since I am a compliance or ethics geek, and I always ask these questions like, what do you do? What kind of due diligence do you do when you buy the companies, making sure that the things that they're creating are with the right intentions, that they have governance, that AI governance, that they have policies in place, and they're doing certain things that are good for humans, right? We all love AI, but there is such a thing, as we've seen in the sci-fi movies, that there it could be, if it gets smart enough, it could take over. So what do you do to prevent it? And I say this, I've got into an organization for humanity where we talk about these things. And one of my personal goals is to become a certified AI ethics auditor so that I can stay on top of these things and advise companies and offer services that help them making sure that they do the right things when it comes to AI and developing, that it's not solely driven by the dollar amount and the technology, because it seems right now in the Silicon Valley, the main factor of AI is technology, technology making money, AI first, human second in the way. And that is really scary.
That is very scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I noted to him also that I developed a AI due diligence checklist. So in the least bit, if you are in the HR role, if you are in the procurement role in the company, and you're about to hire a company that is including AI in their services, whether through a third party or their own development, that you
Yeah.
at least understand what that looks like and start making predictions and assumptions on the results that you get, and maybe adjust your policies based on what you're getting. So you understand the full scope of the risk, which I think a lot of people right now don't even think about. They just go ahead, want to hire these tools because they understand it will help them speed up their job. Speaking of applications, there is thousands of applications and it will produce 50 they're good according to them, which we will talk about with you.
Yeah.
What does that look like? I think we have to slow down and say, okay, yes, AI is great tool, I use it also. I don't say don't use AI, but I also say you have to know your risk and you have to have a governance plan and program in place.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. And just to add a little bit to what you said, there are very smart people work for vendors that produce those tools, and they are very sophisticated and they know what they're doing and very smart, and they know how to sell the software to you and all of that. But it's been my experience as well when you start talking about the validity, the reliability of the tool. Is it compliant with the employment standard? Have you done any self auditing before you launch this tool or anything like that? You get a deer in the headlight type of look, and they're really like, the employer has that responsibility and they need to make sure it was never designed. Yeah, exactly, pointing finger at each other. It was never designed to be the only tool for selection and all of that, which is, in a sense, it's true. ATS should not be the ultimate decision maker for your selections, but you will see that the vendor think it is. I'm giving you a tool that is sophisticated that will help you accomplish what you want to accomplish, which is selection. The ball gets lost, if you will, when you start talking about who's reliable for discriminatory measure, who's reliable for unethical decisions, and who's reliable when it comes to filtering out qualified applicants that were never even invited to be interviewed, much less to be hired, to be considered for hiring decision. So that's where the water gets murky and people don't know who's ultimately responsible. But
Right.
we will talk about that as we progress.
So, can you walk our listeners about ATS, the intent? Like, what is it supposed to do? I am not an HR person. I know about
Yeah.
it a little bit from applications, but what was the intent, how it's being used? And then, yeah, where is the risk and who is really responsible, right?
Yes. Yeah, I'll be happy to talk about that. At one point, before applying applicant tracking systems and the emergence of the AI technology, recruiters had to go through thousands and thousands of applicants, and I don't envy them for that. It was very time consuming. It's highly labor intense process, and they had to go through a lot of application just to get a qualified set of applicants that are potentially can be hired for a job title, right? And the spread of the internet and job vacancies going global because of the internet even made their job more daunting. So instead of getting application from one geographical area or even the United States, they started getting applicants from all over the world. So it made the bad problem worse for them. And then ATS, applicant tracking system, emerged as a tool to solve this problem. With the emergence of AI, they looked at it as a tool. Okay, it can automatically throw away unqualified applicants and all of that, and just leave us with the good set of applicants who are potentially qualified to be up hired for the job, so they can push those applicants on to the hiring manager and take it for the hiring manager to take a look at. So just to make the long story short, the ATS system kind of simplified the recruiter's job and made it much easier, and they didn't have to go through thousands of applicants in order to get the good set of applicants that can be people that can be hired. But the thing about it is, when you look at it this way, that's why recruiters vehemently defend ATS, and rightfully makes their job easier. But at the same time, recruiters are not concerned whether the tool is compliant, ethical, or legal. They wanted a tool that makes their life easier and make it easier for them to select applicants.
So how does it actually work? You have a job posting that you put into the ATS and then it matches up with resumes that
So
you put through.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly what it does, it parse. They have That's where the human bias comes into play, because the ATS is as good as you make it out to be. So as the old adage in technology goes, garbage in, garbage out. The human sets the standards, the guardrails, if you will, for the based on keywords they want in certain resumes and all of that. They also ask the system to weed out like people who are not even qualified, who are not legal and to work for the job. Anything that can throw people out will specify for ATS to throw away any application that's not there. But the human bias comes into play when it comes to algorithms and what you train the system to do. If the person who is doing the prompts, the coder, if you will, has different standards or different biases or any kind of subtle biases, let's say you can set a guardrail where you can tell them, do not hire anybody who have more than 10 years of experience. So you end up disproportionately filtering out people who are older, and that would be a violation of ADEA, for example. So even though you might not necessarily say, you might not include the race or the gender or the age or anything like that, your biases can eliminate people disproportionately and create legal risk and ethical violations within the system.
So does from the way I see it, ATS would be great at weeding out the people who do not qualify for these jobs. Maybe with the question like at minimum you're looking for master degree. So anyone
Right.
who does not have master degree, then they would be put into a different pile and they don't belong. And then a human should be looking at everyone who has master degrees. But
Exactly.
HR probably wants to simplify, or the recruiters wants to simplify their work even further. So they
Right.
try to scale it down. And I think that's the tricky part, right? Because like you're saying,
Absolutely.
you can weed out a lot of good people. We all know that resumes are supposed to be only 2 pages long. And sometimes, and it's in my own personal experience, it is really hard to describe all the variety of things you did in the way that fits in 2 pages, right?
Yeah,
Especially,
sorry to interrupt, but another concern is the tool wasn't meant to be the ultimate decision maker on who's going to be in or out. We do not have, even with agentic, with the progress with the agentic AI right now, we do not have tools that measure someone's ability to lead or ability to be a team player or things of that nature. Yeah, there are technical issues, the technical qualifications, knowledge, skills, and abilities can be measured, but the non-technical stuff are not going to be measured by an applicant tracking system, at least not yet. So if you are going to ignore the human factor and not look at things that can predict someone's ability to succeed in a job, such as being a team player, being a leader, their
Kindness,
dedication, how
right?
motivated they are to
Accountability, right?
exactly accountable.
Transparency, right? All
All of
those trust.
all of that, if you are relying solely on AI or applicant tracking system with AI embedded in it, all of this stuff are going to be ignored, and you end up weeding out a lot of people that are qualified for the job. And worse yet, if the system is weeding out people that are from a protected groups. We talked about how could you set the experience guardrails where you can make it short experience. Well, you're not necessarily weeding out people above 50 years old, but if you do that, then you are going to disproportionately affect those people, and that's where the legal liability comes into play. So you don't necessarily need to specify the race or the gender or the age, because people go to certain schools, HBCUs, for example, and there are more likely to be African Americans than white, right? Because that's the vast majority. So if you don't necessarily, you're not necessarily discriminating based on race, but if you specify what universities are going to consider for an engineering job, let's say, and which universities are not going to consider, then you can end up creating a racial discrimination by disproportionately eliminating people from certain universities. So I'm giving you this as an example just to tell you, you really don't need to say, you don't need to be intentional in your violation or your discrimination. You can do things, you can prompt AI to do things that
Mhm.
end up being discriminatory if you don't know what you're doing, and if you're not keeping the compliance and ethics in mind when you do those prompts.
Wow, great. So
Yeah.
now to flip to, okay, we know HR recruiting teams are using the ATS. We know that if you're not using it carefully or with ethics and compliance in mind, you can go down the wrong path and weed out the wrong kind of people or discriminate against certain groups of people. So, what can companies do, or how should companies look at, okay, we want to use these systems,
Yes.
what does it look like? What should we be looking at? Where do we get help? How do we understand that we use this system in the best way possible, that it does help us provide to weed out the candidates that do not qualify for for certain jobs, but that we're still within the legal and ethics and compliance bounds? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's very, I don't want to belittle the challenges the employer is facing right now with employing those tools, because the challenge comes in many ways. One important factor is that there are no government agency or any type of legal governance that would come and certify your applicant tracking system as compliant. And when we talk about applicant tracking system in general, there is not one standard software with the same features. So all of that can be very challenging for the employer to know whether the system they're using is compliant or not. Where when it comes to compliance, I think, in my opinion, and people might be more technologically sophisticated than me and know more about the process, it comes down to the proof is in the pudding, right? If you look at the applicant tracking system and you run simple impact ratio analysis, taking the factors based on protected criteria, race, gender, national origin, and look at the people that are coming to your bin as qualified, and look at the people that are not coming as qualified, and just do simple regression analyses, because I can show you what you can do, for example, in order to, in my presentation here, I'll take you to that section. I'm going to go ahead and skip and show you how a simple regression analysis, impact ratio analysis, can help you understand what you are doing. And let me know if you see it.
Yep, I see your presentation.
So this is just for the sake of simplicity, right? If you have a job And this is a case study I kind of gave presentation about. If you have let's say a bank and you're trying to hire financial analysts, you have 800, a pool of 800 applicants, for example. If those are the 800 applicants that the system gave you and they are weeded out as all qualified, simple regression and simple impact ratio analysis would be looking at the percentages of the applicants in the pool, whether they're male or females, the percentage of the people that are hired, and just look at the selection rate of those people and see how our males are, for example, compared to females. Here in the selection rate of female is 1.25, and the selection rate for males is 3.33%. So you could see that the males are getting higher at double the rate of females. Continuing on, if you take those numbers and analyze them further, doing an impact ratio analysis, you see here the male selection rate is double the female selection rate. And it doesn't necessarily immediately you can say, oh, I'm discriminating against females, but it's just it makes you kind of go back and revisit the female pool and look at their qualification. Are they as qualified as males? Why are males are getting hired at a higher rate? And this is when we talk about human in the loop. This is what we mean. So there is an 80% rule that's always been a kind of guideline for discrimination cases, and you can take a look to see if it meets the 80% threshold. So taking in this example, the impact ratio was 0.37 five. That's taking the female selection rate, dividing it by the male selection rate, and you can see it does not, it's less than 80%, and it fails the 80% rule, indicating potential adverse impact against females. And this is just an example, it's not a real numbers. You can do a standard deviation, the Fisher exact, to see if the adverse impact is significant. And those are very, very basic tools, but they are very helpful tools in giving you an example and giving you an idea whether the system is disproportionately weeding out or filtering out certain groups over others. So I just wanted to give you that example.
Yeah, great example. Thank you. So now, in your experience, because you were on the EEO side and you've investigated companies, do you feel that companies actually do these kind of analysis based on their hiring practices? Do you see that in put in practice? Not enough. I can only speak to the experience that I had, and I don't know that the companies I worked for ever went that far to do it. In my mind, it makes sense to
Yes.
make it as your part of your compliance auditing, to take a look at what it looks like, and maybe every year do sporadically few roles that you've hired for and what that look like, just to do a sample. But in your experience, do companies do that, or they shy away from it?
Companies that worked with the federal contractors in the past. Now the regulations can differ, from this administration has different standard than the previous one. But companies that did business with the federal government and have federal contract, we're obligated to do such analyses, what's called self-auditing,
Mhm.
and things of that nature. It really boils down whether the company is really responsible, and they want to know, or they want to know where they can improve and how they can remedy problems or not. But if I can answer your question directly and frankly, I think the more sophisticated companies, or the more compliance cognizant companies, do those type of analyses, and you can see it really does not take a very sophisticated statistician or IO psychologist or anything like that in order to conduct those analyses. Simple percentages can give you a very good idea about what the system is doing for you. But it really like varies from one employer to the other. The requirements right now are very loose, and it tends, it's like you're studying a material but you really don't have tests by the end of the day, so it's not likely to put a lot of emphasis on it. So when you have more of a monitoring, government monitoring, you will find companies take more serious role in doing these analyses. When you have less government monitoring, companies tend to lax or put their guardrail down and all of that. So it depends from one company to the other, but those are, if you really want to assess your system from compliance standpoint, this is very rudimentary analysis you can start with in order to know what's going on in my pool of applicants.
Right. So it sounds to me like it's a best practice, and if you want to achieve a compliance program that is not just a check box kind of a compliance program, just because you're a government contractor, that you would do some kind of an analysis because you have to. As we know, in order to get better, in order to make our systems and programs better, you always have to look back and see how you're doing, right? Without that,
Absolutely.
you would not know where to make changes and make the program better. So I guess the advice here to our listener is take a look and select maybe five separate positions for the
Yeah.
start and see.
Sampling.
Yep, do a sample and see what it
Yeah,
looks like, and maybe every 6 months or once a year, whatever your time allows you to, because I know compliance programs and personnel run lean all the time, and there's just
absolutely.
so many things to do. But do the sample. I would also suggest that HR is not involved in the analysis of the sample, that a third department, whether it's internal audit or compliance, gathers the information for those positions and then provides some kind of a written report, and then from there it can be discussed how it could be improved, or at least open that conversation. But I feel like a lot of times companies shy away from asking these questions or looking back because they are so overloaded with
Absolutely.
everything that's on their plate. So, like we say, and we repeat it all the time, take time. Don't rush through the next thing, and like stop and look back is really important for
Yeah, and that's why you see applicant tracking system is used and used arbitrarily, because you said that the people have a lot of priorities, and companies that really care about ethics, like you said, they should be, maybe even if within the HR, but their sole responsibility would be ethics and compliance, and such as when you have an ethics and compliance officer, and his or her role would be to make sure that the personnel activity data is in compliance. But yeah, if you want to lump it with HR and all of that, things going to get prioritized, things going to get ranked importance. If you have a report due to the CEO, for example, and you also have to do your self auditing, I'm sure the CEO report will become more important, versus if you have someone who is solely work on ethics and compliance, and their job is just that, and everything they produce is based on ethics and compliance. That's the difference that comes into play.
Yeah. I loved our conversation, and I loved how focused we were on one area of ethics and compliance, because there's always so much to say. So, thank you, Rad, for joining me today and sharing your insights. Your experience is always and your perspective, very valuable. I always enjoy our conversation. So, to everyone listening, thank you so much for listening. Take a moment to reflect, take a look at what are you doing when it comes to your ATS systems today, and if you are on the legal or ethics and compliance side and you don't know, have this as the opening door to reach out to your HR or your recruiters to find out what that's going to look like. Have those conversations. I think it's really important. So until next time, let's talk about ethics. Thank you, Rod, again for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I enjoyed the conversation. It was a very thought stimulating conversation, and I look forward to more in the future.
Great. Thank you.